When you make a deal with something that isn't human, whether it be a fairy, a demon, or even a sentient pit in the woods, breaking the terms of that deal can have horrifying consequences. Across the world, there are folk tales that warn of unpaid debts between humans and other beings. Today, we'll look at 6 movies from 6 different cultures that explore the horrors of getting into a deal with something you don't understand. I will be spoiling everything I talk about, and I hope you enjoy. Frewaka is a folk horror movie that explores many aspects of Irish mythology. I have been fascinated with this topic since I was little and came across it in a comic book I was reading. The fairies, banshees, puka, Tuatha De Danann are some of the beings I became really interested in, and they are all present here in one way or another. The main character is a caretaker for the elderly, and her agency sent her off to a remote Irish town to assist an old lady. Upon arriving to town, it becomes clear that this is a place where legends and folklore are real. The house that she is looking for has a bad reputation, and the locals try to deter her from even getting there. During her walk, she hears a loud scream, which I believe was the sound of a banshee, female spirits that announce death. She also spots a goat, which could be the puka or puck, shapeshifters that bring both good and bad fortune. The old lady that lives in the house is very cautious of spirits. She places salt around the place. There is a horse hoof in front of her door, and she's so thorough that she even pees herself, because spirits don't like that. Her story is that on her wedding night, she was taken by the fairies. There was a goat involved, and from my understanding, this was based on a real ceremony called the Puck Fair, where girls are taken and married off to a goat from the mountains. When she was taken, she was brought into the other world or underworld by the fairies. I don't believe the movie ever refers to them as fairies, which gives them a menacing aura. When people think of fairies, they normally wouldn't think of them as evil, but in this mythology they are, and they hate humans. The place the old lady was brought to is described as an extremely grim world. A madhouse, a famine village, a laundry house, a coffin ship, a field poisoned with blight, a street full of blood and bullets, hundreds of bodies piled into a septic tank, punishment. This description really stood out to me because I initially thought it would be some fantastical medieval depiction of hell. But it sounds like a twisted mix of a bunch of things that I found out are based on real traumatic events. There were several famines in Ireland. There were the Magdalene laundries, which were female prison institutions, and Bloody Sunday, which was a massacre of Irish protesters in 1972. It's like this underworld is an amalgamation of the worst in Irish history, which is a very interesting concept. When the old lady's recalling her time there, it comes across like describing a nightmare, but one that she had to live through and carry that weight her entire life. In order to save her husband struck a deal with the fairies, where he promised them their child in return for his wife. However, in quite the plot twist, it turns out that the child was the caretaker's mother, making the old lady the caretaker's grandma, and the fairies are the ones who actually orchestrated the caretaker's arrival here, as a way to repay the debt they are owed. So I believe that these evil fairies featured here are the Na-Shi, descendants of the gods of Celtic mythology, the Tuatha De Danann. They live in mounds, which are portals to the other worlds, just like the one we heard a description of earlier. Her house has a mysterious red door with many charms on it to ward off anything evil, but behind that door is an entrance to the underworld. Towards the end of the movie, it becomes clear that the fairies are quite prevalent in this town, and they are committed to their goal of obtaining the caretaker. The old lady tries to sacrifice herself and even goes back to the underworld, but she isn't the one that they want. The caretaker finally accepts her fate and goes in herself, putting on a white dress that the Shi presented to her. Going through, it is a green landscape filled with Shi, and on a hill in front of her is a horned man waiting. This is the second folk horror movie based in Ireland I've seen, the first one being Hokum, and I have to say in my opinion this one tackled the topic a lot better than Hokum, in which the folklore stuff was sort of hinted at in the beginning, but never explored as deeply as I would have liked. I loved seeing all the creatures that I knew for a while. As far as the actual scary aspect, this movie had some moments that really gave me chills. The Blacksmith and the Devil is a film from the Basque region, and it takes place in 1835 in a small European village. The vibes of this movie are amazing. The colors, imagery, it all paints a perfect picture of this dark, remote village where folk tales are reality. It is based on the fairy tale The Smith and the Devil, a very famous story that goes back as far as the Bronze Age, making it possibly the oldest fairy tale of all time. In the original, a blacksmith sells his soul to a demon in order to get supernatural blacksmithing powers, and then he outsmarts the demon and his soul remains safe. It was also, of course, published by the Brothers Grimm, and me and these two go way back to when I was a child, and one of my earliest memories is being traumatized by a cartoon of their stories, which is probably why I find folk horror so interesting now. The movie closely follows the Basque version of the tale, following Pachi the blacksmith. He's very feared, and many spooky rumors are told about him by the people here. They say that he killed his wife, went mad, stopped speaking to everyone, and he even took the local honeymaker's leg on one occasion. But the most ominous rumor is that he actually captured the devil and keeps him in his house. An outsider arrives to investigate Pachi and the missing gold that he apparently stole. The investigation launches, and we get to see Pachi's house, which is really cool. Full of crosses and spikes and bear traps that one of the villagers unfortunately falls into, not once, but twice. A little girl gets involved, and it turns out that the blacksmith isn't so bad and shows a good side to her, which is when we get to see his origin story. He made a deal with the devil to watch over him during the war, so he could return to see his wife again. He deserted the war and came back only to find his wife with a child that couldn't have been his. He takes out the lover, and the wife takes her life, leaving only the child, which turns out to be the little girl we just met. So already we're seeing some parallels with the first movie we covered. By fooling the girl, the devil manages to escape, but the blacksmith gets him back with no trouble, which made me stop and think, how is the devil so weak in this movie? Well, that's because this is only Sartayel, a weak, lesser demon. The blacksmith performs all sorts of torture to him in order to get him back for the deal that he didn't like. An interesting one is spilling chickpeas on the floor, which is a weakness for the demon as he gets an insatiable urge to count them. I researched this a little bit and I couldn't find anything as far as demons, but there was a thing where vampires were forced to count rice in order to distract them. The investigator shows up, and plot twist, he's actually Alastor, a high-ranking archdemon. He is here to collect the blacksmith's soul, which was an unpaid debt, and he also demotes Sartayel to the 5th circle of hell. More specifically, the sad and repressed section, Boiling Pot 203. We've gone through a number of hell depictions on this channel, and I always found it interesting when they are systemized and bureaucratic. The girl really wants to see her mom again, so she actually goes ahead and gives her soul to Alastor, and they all head over to hell. Alastor shows his true form, and it is horrifying. He's massive and grim and full of sharp edges, and he looks like a proper demon. Hell here is full of all sorts of unsettling creatures, wielding what else but pitchforks. The blacksmith distracts Alastor with chickpeas, and Sartayel helps the girl back to the village, while the blacksmith stays in hell to look for his wife. I have to say, this was a very beautiful movie that took a simple fairy tale and packaged it really nicely. I love the designs of Sartayel and Alastor, as well as all the other demons in hell, and how the movie wasn't shy on giving the monsters screen time, which is the case in many other movies. On this channel, I talk about a lot of cosmic horror and how not showing the monster can give it a more ominous aura. But I nonetheless appreciate when monsters are well designed and right there for us to see, especially when adapting a fantastic folk tale such as this one. Jug Face is our next movie, and I was a bit hesitant to watch this one because it seemed to be more sad than anything else, but it turned out to have very interesting elements of folk as well as cosmic horror. The setting is a small, remote community in the woods where the residents worship the pit, or whatever creature lives inside this pit. It's a muddy hole in the ground. You could walk past it and not think much of it. But this thing dictates the fates of everyone that lives here. A girl in this community is about to be married off, but unfortunately she's pregnant with her brother's child. One of the members here has a special role, a potter, which is kind of like a priest of the pit. It chose him to make pottery that resembles faces of those who the pit wants to sacrifice. These are called jug faces, and he creates them under a trance. By sacrificing these people, the pit remains happy and in return heals them when they need it, and they say that it's been this way since the pox. So the potter makes a jug face of the main character, the one pregnant with her brother's child. But she hides it because obviously she doesn't want to get sacrificed. She disobeyed the wishes of the pit, and naturally bad things start to happen. She starts seeing flashes of the pit and some kind of interference. During a hangout outside, another community member gets killed by some mysterious means. We see it through these flashes that seem to be the point of view of the creature. However, the creature is never shown. It could be the pit just having some power of attacking, although I thought it would be interesting if there was an actual monster inside it, which came out during these flashes, while the pit is just its home. She also starts to see some sort of shadow or spirit. These are called the shunned, and they are very upset because she hid her jug face and explained that her grandfather did the same thing for his wife's jug face, and he was punished with some sort of poison. Now her brother is sick and they turn to the pit for help, unaware of the fact that the pit is currently upset. The healing ritual consists of bathing in the mud, but since the pit is angry, it actually takes him here. The priest is blamed for the entire mess, and the community decides to punish him and have the pit elect the next potter. However, the girl comes clean and they sacrifice her instead. This pit, or whatever resides within it, is really interesting to me, and it made me wonder how it initially came into contact with people. Maybe it's always been there, but they do say the whole thing started with the pox and by seeking help from it. And the concept of the potter is also really cool. Who knows what kind of trance the pit induces in him and takes him over to translate its Lovecraftian thoughts into these jug faces, definitely causing a toll on the potter, whose mind wasn't meant for these kind of transmissions. November is an Estonian film that takes place once again in a small village, which is home to witches, werewolves, demons, and even the plague. It takes the forms of a woman, then a goat, and then a pig, but the villagers here manage to trick it. Life here is pretty grim, so they resort to all sorts of schemes in order to survive and get by. There are these little creatures called krats that are like servants, mostly used for stealing livestock from your neighbors. You make them from inanimate objects such as pitchforks, buckets, and anything you have laying around. But there was one example where it was a snowman, so I guess it can really be whatever you want. Once it's made, you go to the crossroads to meet up with the devil, who will give your krat a life. The price to pay for this is of course your soul. However, the villagers are quite witty, so they trick the devil by giving him black currants, which is some kind of berry, instead of blood, and then he uses this as the contract and the soul remains safe. These krat are based on real folklore, and it's really spot on for the Estonian version of the krat. They were created as helpers, and they constantly needed to be given a task. If they were left idling, they would become evil and dangerous. Once a krat served their purpose, the master would give them an impossible task, such as making a ladder out of bread, causing the krat's life to end. But the devil learned his lesson, and when the next guy tried to trick him, he took his soul anyway, not falling for the trick. He gave his snowman krat a life, but the debt got paid later. The villager wanted the krat to steal the woman he loved, but it was explained that krat can only steal objects and livestock, not people. Later on, it turns out that the devil let the guy's life go on until the snowman melted. Once the krat died, so did its maker, because you really can't trick the devil and get away with it forever. This movie tackles the folklore stuff sometimes in a silly tone, like when a guy goes to a witch to ask how to make a love potion, and she tells him to bake a cake out of his own poop. I loved whenever the witch was on screen. She seemed really sweet and kind, and people only came to her with love problems, instead of asking how to make baby paste. But then other times, it's a little more serious, like this girl transforming into a werewolf, and this one sleepwalking off a building while seeing spirits. Some of the shots reminded me of Eggers' films, but the movie had its own flair. The krat doing tasks while steam leaves hot cups of tea, all the villagers banding together to trick the plague, people seeking love advice from the kind-hearted witch who's been through everything. There's something really unique about this one, and if you're gonna pick any from this video to watch yourself, I would say go watch this one. I spoiled a little bit of it here, but I left a lot unsaid, and it's honestly so weird that you can still find a lot of good stuff inside it. Since the release of the trailer for Robert Eggers' Werewolf, I've been really interested in werewolf media, so much to the point that I'm thinking about making a video just on werewolves. There are quite a few depictions out there, but few approach the topic from a folklore side of things. However, the beginning of American Werewolf in London does somewhat go for that angle, and that part of the movie has always been my favorite, where two friends find themselves lost in the countryside of England, with the night and full moon approaching fast. They find their way into a small village and locate the Slaughtered Lamb pub, where all the locals seem to be in on something, staring at the pair like they've never seen outsiders before. The vibes aren't too bad though. People are hanging out and talking and playing darts and chess. The two friends spot a pentagram on the wall surrounded by two candles, and when they inquire about it, everyone stops what they're doing, and the vibes turn so bad that they have to leave. Right when thunder starts outside. The innkeeper is reluctant to let them go, but the others are fine with it, giving them a few ominous tips.
Stay on the road. Keep clear of the moors.
So they leave, but as soon as they do, we see a shot of a full moon, and the people in the pub hear a distant howl. all acknowledging the danger of that sound and the concern for those unlucky enough to find themselves out there. The thick fog makes it hard to find the path, and now they hear the sinister howl coming in from the darkness. The sound begins circling them like a shark, and you just get this overwhelming fear of dread and hopelessness as they realize they're out of options by now. They pick a direction, but it's already right in front of them. The beast kills one of them, but before it gets to the others, the villagers pull up and shoot it, transforming it back into a human. So the friend that survived got lucky. He wasn't killed here by the werewolf. Or was he lucky? The werewolf actually bit him and gave him an arguably worse fate than death. He starts to show signs of the curse and eventually turns into a werewolf himself. His life was spared that night in the countryside, which put him in debt that had to be paid. Something about this intro always captivated me. The most notable parts of the movie are probably the transformation scene and the ending with the werewolf raiding through the streets of London. But there is something special about this hostile rural landscape, where a werewolf is just out and about, and the only safe haven being the small pub where the locals aren't too fond of strangers, and have this secret knowledge of a monster that stretches back for centuries. Now, this one is last because it is more of an honorable mention than a real entry, as it isn't really scary, just super weird, and for some reason really stuck with me. Maybe it's the simplicity of it, because not much happens until the very ending. Also, the movie is visually pleasing, packed with beautiful shots of rural Iceland. Essentially, a couple living in Iceland have a sheep farm, and somehow one of the sheep gives birth to a humanoid sheep hybrid. It has a human body and a sheep's head, and it's actually kinda cute. I really like the moments where they're all just hanging out as a family, even though it's a weird situation. And what's really weird is how accepting everyone is of this. The couple immediately takes the creature in as their own child, from my understanding because they previously lost a child. When a new character is introduced, he's a little taken aback, but soon starts to like the creature too. The actual sheep that gave birth wants it back and tries to take it, but the couple solves that by killing the sheep. This was the first thing that happened that kind of unsettled me. The creature's true mother wanting to get its child back, but obviously not having many skills as a sheep to do anything about it. By taking a child that isn't theirs, they meddled with the natural balance, and sure enough, at the end, someone comes to correct that mistake. This is the father of the sheep, and a full-grown version of whatever creature this is. He's darker and has a human body besides the head, which is of a ram. He shoots the husband and takes the little sheep back. For essentially the whole movie, we were just watching the couple tackling this new life with a sheep child, and the only interference by nature was the sheep's mother trying to get it back. But that was pretty early on. And then in the very end, out of nowhere, the breaking of nature is corrected, a classic theme in folktales.